Hello, and welcome to Stories from India, a podcast where we talk about myths, legends, and folk tales from India. I'm your host, Narad Muni, and I'm a mythological character myself. I have the gift of eternal life and knowledge of the past, the present, and the future. By profession, I'm a traveling musician and a storyteller. So the way I'm doing my job is by podcast. In this episode, we are going to talk about the churning of the ocean. It was an experiment on a cosmic scale. It involved pretty much every major god you can think of, including all three members of the Holy Trinity. Brahma, the creator, who also happens to be my dad, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer. And not one, but two avatars of Vishnu. Let's dive in. Our story begins with Indra, the king of the Devas, relaxing and enjoying his time in heaven, doing generally nothing much. Just living life, king size. He had the usual party crowd at his grand party, with Apsaras who had kicked off their shoes and taken to the dance floor, Gandharvas, the celestial musicians, rocking it on stage, which itself was decorated with giant-sized balloons. I was at the party too. I'd volunteered to belt out a few tunes on my veena, but Indra wasn't having any of it. He just wanted me to have a good time. So I preferred to focus instead on the giant cake that never seemed to get smaller, no matter how many slices I ate, and the bottomless drinks that really were bottomless because the bottoms of the cups were all invisible, and they refilled magically. There was also a magic wish-fulfilling tree in the corner, but it had a bit of a queue. There always is a bit of a queue for that tree. That tree could grant just about anything, and that made it extremely popular every time there was a party here. Normally, I'm always aware of what's about to happen. You probably know by now that I have knowledge of the past, the present, and the future. But I do need to consciously apply a switch in my head to think of the future. But this time, I was focused way too much on the delicious cake, and I let my guard down. If I had focused instead on what was coming, I could have seen disaster coming and at least warned Indra and Airavat. Over all of that party noise, the doorbell rang, and soon the butler announced an unexpected visitor. It was Durvasa. That alone shot off 100 warning bells in my head. I'll tell you why. If there's one person whom you don't want to cross, that is Durvasa. He's a rishi who finds every possible excuse to be angry with you. And he has an above average curse magnitude index. A dangerous combination, given how trigger happy he was. Here's an example. If Durvas visits you, he'll probably curse you if you're not around. And if you're in the house, he'll probably curse you for wasting a perfectly nice day outside. He'll eat all of your food and then curse you if the toothpick you provided was slightly bent. As another example, he cursed Shakuntala's husband to forget her in episode 37, A Fishy Engagement, just because Shakuntala took a while to answer the doorbell. Just those experiences should have terrified everyone present. And mostly they did. Except for Indra. Indra was the king of the Devas, and to him, Durvas was at best an equal. I could tell right away that Indra was just taking this guy far too lightly. But I was too far away across the room to warn him. Durvas suddenly spoke up. Indra, I am going to give you... Here it comes, I thought. But I was genuinely surprised when Durvas continued. This gift. And he handed Indra an amazing looking flower garland. Oh, come on, you didn't have to, said Indra, even as he quickly grabbed the garland from Durvas. He had a closer look, and quickly his face changed to disappointment. Oh, it's real flowers, as opposed to precious stones cut into flower shapes, he said. Okay, Airavat, put this away, please, he said, half-heartedly, as he tossed the garland to Airavat. Airavat wasn't your usual party animal. He was an elephant, and as such, Indra's means of travel everywhere. When Indra tossed him the garland, Airavat tried to catch it. But he was holding a drink in his trunk, so he tried to catch it with his front legs. As you can imagine, that crushed the garland completely. Durvas, who had been observing all this, decided it was now time to step in. He could see Indra had become extremely arrogant, treating gifts with disdain. He had disrespected the garland that Durvas had presented him. Indra would have to learn humility. Durvas got ready to curse Indra. He put on his gauntlet, a giant glove with the colorful shiny stones on back, and snapped his fingers, much like Thanos would have done. In an instant, everything was transformed. We were all immediately transported to some kind of beach. Indra tried to teleport back, but he couldn't. His palace, his staff, his gifts, even his wish fulfillment tree, and all of Swarg, it had simply disappeared. And Indra had become an ordinary mortal now. And so too all the Devs. This was heartbreaking for the Devs. Not in the least because it meant no more parties. Indra wanted to do something about it, to get all of his stuff back, but couldn't think of what. So I put in a bit of friendly advice there. Hey, have you thought of talking to my dad, Brahma the creator? You know how he's always itching to create something? Maybe if he's in a good mood, he could probably create it all back for you. Splendid idea, Narad, said Indra. When I get back all my stuff, I promise to make you the guest of honor at the next party. You'll get a reserved parking spot and the first shot at the tree. Sure, I murmured. I could see clearly that this was not going to happen. But that didn't stop me helping out. I did think Durvas had been a wee bit unjust here. Indra, together with the Devs, visited my dad. I did not go along. You know how sometimes it makes you uncomfortable to have hundreds of your friends visit your home? Besides, I had places to be, songs to sing, food to eat, people to meet. The conversation with Brahma was short, it turned out. Brahma could not actually create any of those things. Well, he could, but were the Devs prepared to wait for, let's say, a few billion years? Did Indra realize how long it had taken to create all of those in the first place? And when Indra suggested that maybe Brahma could create other Brahmas, who could then create other Brahmas, who could make parts for assembly, thereby exponentially reducing the time required? Brahma didn't like that idea. Recently, as in a few episodes ago, he had had a demonstration from Vishnu about how he was not the only Brahma around, and that there was a Brahma in every universe. That had jarred him. To think that he would have to share his own personal universe with many other Brahmas was a bit hard to digest. Brahma told the Devs that that was not going to work out, and that they should instead talk to Vishnu, the preserver. Well, so that's where the party of hundreds of Devs went next. I knew they were arriving. Yeah, foresight and everything. So I dropped by to speak to Vishnu. This was going to be exciting. Indra and the Devs arrived at Vishnu's home. And Vishnu's home is basically like a luxury yacht. That's because it's inside the coils of a giant snake that floats in the ocean of milk, or Shirasagar. The snake is Sheshnag, whom we have encountered before on this podcast. Vishnu heard Indra and the Devs out, though he already knew what they were going to say. I often wonder how he manages to be patient through all these sorts of conversation. Anyway, Vishnu asked Indra if he really wanted everything back. Of course, replied Indra. What are you willing to do to get everything back? Asked Vishnu. Anything. I'll do anything. Will you churn an ocean with a mountain and a giant serpent? Yes, replied Indra. And accept anything that comes out of it, good and bad? Yes, chorused Indra and the Devs. Vishnu asked, and collaborate with the Asurs? No one replied. This should not be surprising. The Devs and the Asurs were constantly at war with each other. Indra swallowed hard and finally said, Fine, I'll have my secretary set up a parlay with Bali. We'll start with that. Vishnu smiled and moved to his avatar cupboard and looked through a few curious-looking tiny bottles. He read a few labels. Matsya. I thought I threw you out. He tossed that bottle away and it vaporized in midair. Yeah, gods don't need a trash can. Okay, this requires 2 bottles, not 1, he said. One of them was labeled Kurma and the other Mohini. He also pulled out a blueprint labeled the LHC, Large Hill Churner. It showed a huge and tall mountain on the back of a turtle. Definitely not a hill. We'll leave it here, but we'll continue the story midweek, as we'll see how a fragile truce can be made even with your deepest enemies. We'll also see how Vishnu, the preserver, preserves a truce when it starts breaking down, but only long enough to achieve immediate objectives. Some notes on the show. Durvasa is the meanest kind of house guest you can imagine. He has cursed most people he's met. Some high-profile victims of Durvas include Shiva, the destroyer, Krishna himself, Goddess Lakshmi, Goddess Saraswati, and Lakshman from the Ramayana. Occasionally, he has done a good thing here and there. For example, in the Mahabharata, he was responsible for giving Kunti a phenomenal superpower, which she did use to continue her dynasty. We'll cover all of these in future episodes. Sheshnag, whom I mentioned before, was Character of the Week in episode 13, Nurse Ratched and Umbrella Mountain. He has also accompanied Vishnu on many of his avatars. I've also put in some links to other episodes where we have covered Vishnu's avatars before. That's all for now. If you have comments or suggestions, or if there are particular stories you'd like to hear, please do let me know by leaving a comment or a review on the site sfipodcast.com or tweet at sfipodcast. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get notified automatically of new episodes. Thanks to all of you listeners for your continued support and your feedback. The music is from purpleplanet.com. That's purple-planet.com. I'll see you next time.